You already have it. The trait that separated every human who survived the Ice Age from every human who didn't. It's in your body right now. You were born with it. You've had it your entire life. Most people never use it the way it was built to be used. It isn't intelligence. It isn't opposable thumbs. It isn't language or fire or the ability to make tools. It's something far more specific than any of those things. Far more physical, far more brutal. And the humans who had it but didn't use it, who sat down when they should have moved, who stopped when they should have kept going, they're not your ancestors. Their bloodline ended. Yours didn't. Here's the scale of what we're talking about. Over a dozen hominin species have existed on this planet. The exact count depends on how researchers classify regional variants, but the pattern is the same regardless of the number. Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo naledi, Neanderthals, with brains as large as yours, with fire, with burial rituals, with tools they'd been refining for 400,000 years. All gone. One species survived, yours. Here's why. Now, researchers have known for decades that something biological separated the survivors. Something measurable. Something that shows up in the fossil record as a physical change in the skeleton. A change that happened in your lineage around 2 million years ago and hasn't reversed since. I want to plant two things in your head before we go further, because we're coming back to both. First, the trait isn't in your brain. It's lower, much lower. And when I tell you exactly where it is, in which specific structures of your body, you're going to be able to locate it yourself, right now, without moving from where you're sitting. Second, this trait only works when it's used continuously, across time, under sustained pressure. The humans who had it, but applied it in short bursts, who couldn't sustain the effort, left the same record as the ones who never had it at all. We'll get to both. But first, the evidence that proved this, and the scientist who spent 30 years being told he was wrong. Wait, because before we go into the evidence, I need to tell you what's actually being eliminated here. The mainstream view in paleoanthropology, for most of the last century, was that humans became dominant through brain size, cognitive complexity, the ability to plan, communicate, and cooperate. That story is not wrong, but it is incomplete, because the skeleton tells a different story. Structures present in every Homo sapiens body that have no function in a purely cognitive animal. Structures that only make sense in an animal built for one specific physical task. A task that no other primate performs, that no other large mammal on Earth performs in quite the same way. We'll get to the scientist who identified those structures and what he found after we look at the elimination in detail, because first, who was dying and why the standard answer doesn't hold. Let me show you the elimination in detail. Because the species that didn't make it aren't an abstraction. Homo habilis existed for roughly 700,000 years. Smaller-brained than us, but tool-using. Present across East Africa. Gone approximately 1.4 million years ago. Homo heidelbergensis existed across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Brain size overlapping with modern humans. Evidence of shelter construction, coordinated hunting, possible symbolic behavior. Gone approximately 300,000 years ago. Neanderthals. This is the one that matters most. They coexisted with us in Europe for at least 10,000 years. They had fire, burial rituals, ochre pigment use, jewelry made from eagle talons, brain volumes averaging slightly larger than modern humans. They are gone, every single one, within 40,000 years of our arrival in Europe. Researchers have spent decades trying to explain that elimination. Disease, interbreeding, climate, competition. No single factor explains it. The evidence points to multiple pressures converging. But here is what the skeletal evidence shows, and this is the detail that most summaries skip. Neanderthal skeletons show a consistent pattern of muscular overdevelopment in the upper body. Massive arm and shoulder musculature. Short, powerful limbs optimized for burst strength in close quarters confrontation. Their bodies were built for short, violent, decisive engagement. Ours were not. Our skeletons tell a completely different story. Longer limbs, narrower hips, lighter upper body musculature, proportions that make no sense for fighting, but make perfect sense for something else, something that took hours, not seconds. And that difference in skeletal proportions, consistent across every Homo sapiens fossil we've found, absent in every eliminated lineage, is the first piece of evidence for what actually separated us. There is one researcher who has spent more time on this question than almost anyone alive. His name is Daniel Lieberman, professor of biological sciences at Harvard University. Over 30 years studying the evolution of the human body. And for most of that time, the mainstream view was that the brain was the answer, that cognitive complexity was the dividing line. Lieberman didn't disagree with that, but he kept looking at the skeleton and seeing structures that the cognitive story couldn't explain. Structures that only made sense in an animal built for one specific physical task. In 2004, he and his colleague Dennis Bramble published a paper in Nature titled Endurance Running and the Evolution of Homo. The thesis was simple, uncomfortable, and to many of Lieberman's colleagues at the time, completely wrong. We didn't survive because we were the smartest. We survived because we were the best at something that sounds almost embarrassingly simple. Something that every one of your ancestors did. Something you can do right now. And something the eliminated species could not do well enough. We'll get there. Here is what Lieberman and Bramble proposed in 2004. And here is why it was controversial. Persistence hunting. Not ambush, not group coordination, not trapping or weaponry. The deliberate pursuit of prey over long distances, hours, not minutes, at a pace that forces the animal into fatal heat exhaustion while the human continues. Most large mammals cool themselves through panting. Panting requires stopping or slowing. At a sustained trot, a quadruped cannot pant efficiently enough to prevent heat buildup. A human can, because a human sweats. 2 to 4 million eccrine glands, distributed from scalp to sole. Running, a human dumps heat at a rate no four-legged pursuit predator can match over distance. Add the mechanics. A human running stride uses the Achilles tendon as a spring, storing and releasing elastic energy with each footfall, reducing the metabolic cost of running by approximately 50% compared to a stride without that tendon. Add the nuchal ligament, a thick band of connective tissue running from the base of the skull to the upper spine, unique to humans among primates, that stabilizes the head during running without requiring muscular effort. Add the gluteus maximus, your largest muscle, largely inactive during walking, firing maximally during running, that prevents the torso from pitching forward with each stride. Every one of those features is useless for climbing, useless for fighting, useless for the short-distance sprints that dominate most predator-prey interactions. They exist for one thing: running something into the ground. This isn't theoretical. We have living evidence of persistence hunting documented as recently as 2016. Louis Liebenberg, a South African researcher who has spent decades studying traditional San hunter-gatherers in the Kalahari, filmed and recorded persistence hunts conducted on foot, in daylight, across open terrain with no projectile weapons. The hunter tracks the animal, maintains a trot. The animal sprints, stops, recovers, sprints again. The hunter does not sprint. The hunter does not stop. After 2 to 5 hours, in temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius, the animal, typically a kudu or gemsbok capable of running at 60 kilometers per hour in short bursts, simply stops. It cannot continue. Its core temperature has exceeded the threshold for sustained muscle function. It stands, chest heaving, unable to flee. The hunter walks up to it. No weapon needed for the kill that the run itself has already performed. In Mexico, the Tarahumara people of the Copper Canyon have been documented running ultra-marathon distances, sometimes exceeding 300 kilometers over 2 days, in thin sandals for both transportation and hunting. This evidence was gathered across multiple research efforts and later brought to mainstream attention by journalist Christopher McDougall in Born to Run, a book that, whatever its limitations as a research document, introduced millions of people to findings that had been accumulating in academic literature for decades. These are not superhuman outliers. These are humans using the body that every person alive today carries. The body built by 2 million years of selection pressure for exactly this capability. You have the same body, the question Lieberman asked, and the question that should disturb you is whether you've ever used it the way it was designed to be used. I told you at the start you could find this yourself, right now, without moving from where you're sitting. Here's exactly where to look. The trait is endurance, not strength, not speed, not intelligence. The sustained ability to maintain physical output over time, to keep moving when everything in the environment signals that stopping is reasonable, is the single biological capability that the fossil and anatomical evidence points to as the dividing line between the survivors and the eliminated. And here is where it lives in your body. Reach down and touch the back of your heel, the thick cord running from your heel bone up into your calf. That is your Achilles tendon. It is the most powerful tendon in the human body. In chimpanzees, our closest living relative, it is vestigial, barely functional. In you, it stores and returns up to 35% of the mechanical energy in each running stride. It exists in its current form because your ancestors ran prey to death for 2 million years. Now run your hand up the back of your neck, the ridge of connective tissue you can feel beneath the skin at the base of your skull. That is your nuchal ligament. It does not exist in chimpanzees. It exists in you specifically to stabilize your head while running, so your visual field stays steady and your neck muscles stay relaxed over long distances. Every other primate's head bobs and destabilizes at speed. Yours doesn't. Now, sit back. The muscle you're sitting on, the gluteus maximus, the largest muscle in the human body, fires almost not at all during walking. It fires maximally during running, preventing your torso from collapsing forward with each stride. It is not a sitting muscle. It is not a standing muscle. It is a running muscle, and it is waiting. You just located the trait. It was there the whole time. Here's why endurance, specifically, was the dividing line, and not intelligence, which is the answer everyone expects. Intelligence is expensive. The human brain consumes approximately 20% of total caloric intake, despite representing roughly 2% of body mass. A larger brain requires more food to sustain. In an environment where food was scarce and unpredictable, intelligence without the ability to acquire calories at scale was a liability as much as an asset. Neanderthals had the brain. They had the cognitive complexity. No single cause explains their disappearance. But the skeletal record consistently shows one structural difference that ran across every Homo sapiens body and was diminished or absent in the lineages that didn't survive: the capacity for sustained aerobic output over hours. The Neanderthal build, stocky, cold-adapted, heavily muscled in the upper body, was metabolically expensive and thermally less efficient at sustained running pace. Every calorie a Homo sapiens burned in a persistence hunt returned multiples in protein, fat, and marrow, enough to feed a group, sustain a pregnancy, survive a winter. The brain didn't save us. The ability to feed the brain did. And the thing that fed the brain was the body built for endurance. Remember the first sentence. You already have it. Here's what I didn't tell you then. Having it isn't enough. The humans who had this body but sat still, who stopped when the effort became uncomfortable, who rested when they should have kept moving, they left the same genetic record as the ones who never had it. The trait only works when it's used. Here's what the research actually suggests about the trait in the context of the life you're living now. The Achilles tendon, the nuchal ligament, the gluteus maximus, the eccrine sweat glands. They have not changed in 2 million years. The body that ran prey into heat exhaustion across the Pleistocene savanna is the body sitting in the chair you're sitting in right now. The selection pressure that built it is gone. The predators are gone. The caloric scarcity is gone. The need to chase food across open terrain for hours is gone. But the machinery remains, fully intact, waiting. And what the research on sustained aerobic activity consistently shows, across cardiovascular medicine, cognitive neuroscience, and psychiatric research, is that the body built for endurance does not function optimally when endurance is withheld. The cardiovascular system built to sustain hours of output at moderate intensity deteriorates measurably without that output. The brain built to be fed by a high-calorie persistence hunt consistently correlates in sedentary conditions with elevated anxiety, impaired focus, and disrupted sleep. Responses that appear across the literature, regardless of geography, age, or diet. You are not experiencing a modern disease. You are experiencing what happens when a body built for 2 million years of sustained movement is asked to sit still. And unlike almost every other biological system, aerobic capacity responds rapidly, in weeks, not years, to the stimulus it was built for. The body is not broken. It is not forgotten. It is waiting for the signal it was designed to receive. The survivors didn't survive because they were smarter or stronger or more creative than the species they outlasted. They survived because when the effort became uncomfortable, when stopping felt reasonable, they kept moving. That choice, made millions of times, across hundreds of thousands of years, by people whose names we will never know, built the body you are in right now. And it is still asking you to move.